Okay, so for Morrow Chapter 7, I decided to talk about just kind of like some different highlights of the chapter and things that I thought were especially important when we're teaching writing, because obviously we know like handwriting is important and practicing writing is important, but I just wanted to go over some of the other aspects that I think are often overlooked in the classroom. One of those things is the process of writing. So kind of walking students through, like, we don't just sit down and write anything. We go through the process of pre-writing and brainstorming ideas about what we're going to write about. If it's an expository writing or explanatory, you would be researching your topic and stuff like that. So going through the process of pre-writing and like what are we going to write about, and knowing what ideas you want to put down onto the paper. Drafting, so knowing that the first time you write a piece, it's not going to be perfect and that's not your final product. And then going through the conferencing with the teacher or with peers, and talking about how they can improve the writing. And then after that, they would obviously revise the paper based on what was talked about in the conferencing. And that's kind of revising the material and sentence structure, and then editing mechanics, making sure that grammar and punctuation, capitalization, stuff like that are all correct in the writing, and then ultimately sharing the piece with the class, or publishing it in like a class book for the students to take home or something like that. So I think the process of writing a piece is really important for students to learn, so that they don't feel discouraged if they're just writing a piece kind of right off the bat and then getting more negative feedback, I guess. So just making sure that they know that it's a process and it's not just something that you can sit down and do, and that we need to practice and really think about what we're writing. And then the other thing I think is really important to mention to students, here's Midnight Cat Part 3, is the types of writing that we can do. So obviously we have informational or explanatory text where we're writing about how to do something or giving someone information on a specific topic, which, as I mentioned earlier, for pre-writing, that might involve researching the topic that you're writing about. We have narrative text, so stories that have a plot and characters, a setting, stuff like that, using descriptive words in those texts, and really just telling a story, which I think is one of the easier writing topics for students, just because children are very creative and they're already telling stories verbally, so having them write down those ideas is a really good transition into teaching writing and having them practice writing more often. There's also persuasive text, so kind of conveying your opinion and being convincing is what we always tell students, making sure that they get their point across. And then there's also poetry, which I haven't seen used in any lower grades, anything in early childhood, so I'm interested to see how that would play out in the classroom, just because I know I didn't learn poetry when I was that young, other than nursery rhymes and finger plays, which I guess are a form of poetry. But having students write poetry, I think, could be really helpful with teaching other literacy skills like syllables and letter recognition if you're writing an acronym poem and stuff like that. And then one other thing that I liked that the chapter talked about was the idea of pen pals and writing letters, because that's a good way to get students interested in writing, having that interaction with another student, and it can help them like be more excited about writing because they're talking to like a new student from a different school, and it'll just get them more involved in the writing and like interested in what they're writing about, rather than giving them assignments like write a response to the text that we read or something like that. So I just thought pen pals is a really good idea, and I always loved doing that when I was a kid, so that's something that I hope that I could utilize in my classroom in the future. And yeah, that's my thoughts on the writing chapter.